Hi, I'm Rachel Wright, Certified JIRA Administrator and author of the JIRA Strategy Admin Workbook. Get your copy at jirastrategy.com.
Go ahead and hand it over to Rachel, and she's going to go ahead and share her knowledge and just school us on top JIRA admin mistakes and how to prevent them.
Thank you, Tony.
I'm putting the Summit discount code up here for you guys if you want to grab it. It's up here at the front.
Can you all hear if the mic is down on the table? Is that all right? Yes, in the back? Thank you. Okay, great. Well, welcome. I'm very excited to be in Austin. I'm Rachel Wright. I'm on day 746 of a long-term RV trip. And this is our first visit into Texas, so we're so excited to be here. So thank you.
I forgot we call it a JIRA Genie.
Yeah. There's a story. So someone at work said, if you don't transition your own issues, there's no JIRA Genie standing by to do it for you. Well, and then I became the JIRA Genie because I'll get annoyed and do it for you, right? But anyway, I'm an entrepreneur and a certified JIRA administrator, and I'm the author of the JIRA Strategy Admin Workbook. So I'm here tonight to tell you about the admin mistakes that I've made over the years and also mistakes that I've seen other companies make. So hopefully you can avoid them. So this is a non-technical presentation. This is about strategy and philosophy. So let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to start off by reading you a short story. So there once were 3 companies. The first had a brand new JIRA instance that was smartly set up and implemented, and everything was carefully planned and executed. The projects, issue types, and workflows were documented, and all the users were well trained. And the transition from an old tracking tool was simple, and all the users were happy. The application was pruned and maintained like a beautiful garden, and its administrators were carefully selected process leaders who routinely cared for and meticulously shaped the garden's growth. I'm sure that example of JIRA administration is how all of your applications function, right? This gentleman says yes, yes. So let me tell you a little bit about what I'm more used to. The second company had the complete opposite setup. Their JIRA instance was old, and it hadn't matured or changed in tandem with the company. There were no standards, no recognizable patterns, and certainly no documentation. It was really a free-for-all mentality that resulted in an overgrown swamp of data. Anyone that desired a project customization was instantly made an administrator and made whatever change they wanted. There was no regard for the health of the application as a whole or even future planning. And the swamp became more and more unmanageable for this company every day. All right, so the third company, they wanted JIRA to look and act like all their other internal applications. And they spent many months customizing and making additions, and so much had changed that they couldn't upgrade without wiping out all their custom elements. So their users couldn't take advantage of new features and functions. And one by one, their add-ons became unsupported and their application reached the dreaded end-of-life status. So the recommendations in this presentation are a result of working in these environments and digging them out of the JIRA swamp. So I've got some best practices, some do's and don'ts, and some personal stories of just silly things that I did along the way. But this presentation is a little bit different. I want you guys to choose what we talk about tonight. So I've got 20 stories, 1 slide per story, and we're not going to get through all of this, but anything we don't get through, you can download, and I'll show you that link later on again in the presentation. All right, where would you like to start? Yes, Tony? Issue types. I like this one. Okay, number 13. Yeah. I wish the screenshot was fake, but this is a real example from a real instance. And look how long this selection box scrolls, right? So how many issue types could one company possibly need? Well, the company from this screenshot had 134. And this isn't because they were actually needed. This is because they didn't understand how issue types were used. And every time a new project was created, a brand new set of issue types were created just for that project. In another company, they had a few projects that used the default issue type scheme. And of course, you know that contains every available issue. So reporters in that project were totally overwhelmed when creating a new issue. I mean, how do you scroll through this list and know which one to select? They're not even alphabetical. So the people who had to use these projects and try to report on this data, they had data, but the data wasn't any good. People were just selecting whatever issue type. And the project leads just couldn't even segment their own work. So first, obviously, don't create issue types that you don't need. And try to make the names generic enough so that they apply to multiple projects. You want to share schemes within JIRA. And also, don't assign the default issue type scheme if it contains a lot of issues. There's a conversation right now on Atlassian community about can you delete the default issue type scheme? And no, you can't. But you can leave it sitting in the background, not assigned to any projects. Okay, any questions about horrendous lists of issue types? Has anyone experienced this before? Yes, I'm sorry to hear that. Reese has. Yeah. I don't think so. I think it just dumps all the issue types into that one default scheme. I don't know. I don't know. Let's try it and see. I'll let you know. Okay, so let's jump back to the menu and let's pick another topic. Who's got? Yes, sir. Workflow is everyone's favorite. Workflow number 6. Okay, so this screenshot just shows like a simple asset management workflow, and it's in diagram. There's 2 modes, diagram mode, visual, and text mode, which is considered a little more advanced. So my mistake was I used this edit button right here. Now I thought clicking edit was just going to change what status I was using in that workflow. No. What this button does is this changes the name of the status in all of JIRA. So unless you're really trying to do that, don't edit in this way. So I only found out my mistake because my end users came running because I broke all their stuff. I broke their workflows, I broke their filters. And that's really the worst way to hear you've done something bad is when your end users come running because you've broken their stuff. So the second mistake I made related to workflows is with this close status, the final status. So I thought close was special, right? It's the last status. It's got to have special logic pre-built in so the workflow knows this is the end. Well, no, that's not true. It's just a status like any other. You can name it anything. So I thought it was going to automatically fire that issue closed post function for me, and it doesn't. So what it does is when you create a status, it adds a post function that's called fire a generic event that can be processed by the listener. So you want to change this from a generic event to an issue closed event. And then your users will get the issue closed notification at the end. So there's so many problems and things I've done badly with workflows, but I want to pause for a minute and I want to hear one of your workflow horror stories. Yes, sir.
We have a situation now where, due to someone monkeying around with the workflow definition, we can't get any issues to fall through at sprint closure. They just keep accumulating. Not to fall through. They keep showing up, even the ones that are closed. At least some of them have a resolution.
We should talk about resolutions.
Okay.
Can we jump to resolutions then real quick? Mark says yes in the back. Thank you, Mark. Okay, I have a screenshot for this. This is a pet peeve of mine. Same story? Yeah. That's odd. That's odd, yeah. Okay. I neglected to see which or resolutions 14. Okay, so for resolutions, and I'm glad this came up because this is a good one. In this screenshot, you just see a sample issue with the status closed, but the resolution of unresolved. So this is a bit of a mismatch. You never really want to have this condition occur. So at one company, there were 34 different resolution types. I mean, how many ways are there to close an issue, right? Do we really need 34? A lot of them were just dupes or silly things like rejected by security or rejected by HR or rejected by Joe. And then they even had in progress as one of their resolution types. Now, how can an issue be resolved and still in progress? I don't understand. And then, of course, we had the dreaded unresolved type itself. Somebody created a new resolution and called it unresolved. Please, please, please don't do that. And then at another company, resolutions weren't properly set by the workflow. So in an ideal world, when the developer or whoever's doing the work is done, you pop up an issue transition screen and you ask them, what is the proper resolution? And the resolution really describes the how or the why an issue is getting closed. And, maybe the reason is it's abandoned, or you're not going to fix it, or you've done the work. But you ask the person who did the work to set it. If you can't ask the person, you can set it automatically in the background with a workflow post function. But definitely set it. Don't leave it unset. And the reason you want to avoid this condition is because in the user's default dashboard, that assigned to me gadget considers issues like this unresolved. So even though the work's done, that gadget will show all of these issues that they've already done as unresolved. So JIRA treats this as null. And that's another reason why you don't want to create a value called unresolved, because the second you give it a value, it now has a value. It is no longer null. It is now resolved. Easy way to find this condition is just search for resolution is null. And then for whatever you find, there's only two ways to fix this, right? Resolution isn't one of those like easy edit fields, right? You can fix it with a paid plugin called Script Runner for JIRA, or you can fix it by creating a looping transition. So a transition that doesn't actually change the status forward or backward. It keeps the status the same. So you would loop from closed to closed. But in the background, you would fire a post function, or you would pop up that screen and fix them in bulk. So I would check that, sir. I think that's probably your first culprit as to why. Okay, what is next? Standards. You need them. The end. I can go home now. Okay, great, thank you. Number 20. Okay, so I like this screenshot. So this is just a sample create screen, nothing special here. But when I first inherited my JIRA instance, we would tell users, they would say, hey, we need a new workflow. And I'd say, great, what statuses would you like? I'll build it for you. All right, well, that's a problem, because then we end up with 400 statuses of all sorts of names and duplicates, right? So we got a little better. Then we said, no, wait a minute. You need a new workflow? Click on this little icon shown here on the create screen, and this icon is going to bring up an overlay that shows you all the available issue types in our instance and all the existing statuses. Choose from the list of what's already available. Okay, better, right? Not best. Best is we've surveyed our projects and we've tried to put them into buckets, into categories. And we've even used the category feature to put them into certain categories. So think about what your projects are doing, not who's using them, but how are they using them. So for example, you might have some projects that are specifically for development. You might have some projects that are just to-do lists. Maybe it's legal's to-do list, maybe it's the JIRA team's to-do list, but a to-do list is a to-do list, right? Or maybe it's support. Put these projects into these different buckets and then give them choices. Set up some standards and say, you know what, for this type of project, they probably need this issue type, but they don't need all these issue types. So we now give them a couple choices. We say, we've got 2 schemes for issue types for your type of project. Which would you like? And this has kept us from going down the rabbit hole of customization. So before, 350 JIRA projects, all with different configurations. It's very, very hard to, it's very, very hard to manage. Who wants that, right? So now at least new projects don't suffer from this. Yes, sir. Oh, so just determine what kind of project they are, and then in your mind, group them together, or use the categories feature if you're not already using that. JIRA has a categories feature. You can put them all into a category that says, this is a support type project, or this is a to-do list. And then I show these people, when they request, I show them the choices in Confluence. And I say, hey, look, would you like this or this? And every now and then somebody will still tell me, no, we are special. Ours can't be called bug, it must be called defect. So I always cite the health of the application. I said, if we do this, do you remember a couple years ago when the slightest little change to JIRA would bring the entire application down? Oh, yes, 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 I remember that. All right, maybe I don't need that customization. I've got two examples of customizations requests that you might want to think about. So first, we get a lot of requests for groups. And the moral of the story here is I wasn't asking the correct questions when people were submitting their requests to the JIRA admin team. So they say, hey, create me a group. I say, great. How many people are in your group? 50. Okay, I painstakingly put all 50 people in the group. I make them their group. Everything's happy. I go on to the next thing. When they come back and say, wait, the group's broken. It doesn't work. So what do you mean it doesn't work? Well, we wanted to add the group as a watcher. Well, that's not a JIRA feature. Had I just asked the user, what are you trying to accomplish? I could have recommended a much better implementation method. So as the admin, you really have to dig and ask these questions. And if somebody has asked for something very, very specific in implementation, to me, that's always a red flag that maybe they're not exactly sure what they need. So another good example is an issue type. When they ask for a new one, I say, well, what are you going to use it for? And they say, oh, well, we just need a way to distinguish these issues from these issues. Well, that's not the best use of an issue type. You all know that you want to use a different issue type when you want a different set of screens within the same project, or a different set of workflows, or both. Just to have a distinguisher, not really worth it, right? They could use a custom field, they could use a component, they could use a label, they could do so many other things. But when you have that really long list of issue types, it makes it hard to migrate issues, and it makes it hard to map workflows, because you got to go through each one. I mean, mine scrolls for 8 pages, and I don't wish that pain on anyone. So try not to make customizations to just make one user happy. I know it's hard, but sometimes you've got to be the bad guy, because you've got to look out for the future health of your application. Okay, what's next? Field types. Thank you, excellent. Where is it? Number 15. Okay. So here's an example of something not to do. And we have this all over our instance. It's awful. So somebody wanted a date field, but they created it as a text field. So now you cannot, exactly, facepalm. Thank you, Ian. Agreed. Now you cannot sort. Now you cannot query this information because it's all in a different format. Another one people like to mix up at my organization is checkbox versus radio button. I'm sure you know, but just in case, radio button's used for when there's only one selection, and checkbox is when there's 0, 1, or multiple selections. I think I had another story about issue type. Oh, I did. Okay, so I'm stealing this from the OG leader in Columbus, Ohio, but she had an example where somebody made 3 additional custom fields, all called assignee. One was a user picker, one was a text field, and again, assignee is a standard field. It already exists. Why do you need 3 more? I'm not sure. So now she has to migrate all of these assignees in the wrong field, and they're probably not using the correct username issue type, right? So those text fields, it could be like Christopher instead of Chris. So she's going to have a heck of a job mapping those to the right people in the standard assignee field. So think about when you're creating custom fields, that you pick the proper field type because you can't change it later. Yes, Larry?
So if you want to know a great way to do that, come in August for the add-on for script runner.
July. Definitely July.
More so. July.
Next month.
Great.
So then we have signing and not me.
You can, but why would you want to? They all have different IDs, so
So when we want database, like,
3 separate fields, yeah. So the label doesn't matter, right? You can have as many fields with the same label, but let me tell you what this does to your users. When they try to write a query, which assignee do they pick? They have multiple choices. They can't tell which is used in the project. So you just made it harder for your users to find their data too. I had another story about field types, but I can't remember right now, so we will move on.
as a coach, I'm asked over and over again, like, why JIRA? Why won't it let me do multiple signees? Because you want us to swarm. I want you to talk to them. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. I know what my other point was. If you do find yourself in the situation where you have the wrong field type, as I said before, you can't change it. So your only option here is to create a new field of the correct type, migrate the data over, probably in bulk, then get rid of the old field, and then add the new field to the proper screens. Now, let me tell you one time when this went badly. I created a date type field, and then later we decided, oh, you know what? This is for auditing. Date time would be much, much better, right? Legal's going to like the time in there. Timestamp's good, right? So I said, okay, I wrote some workflow rules that captured the time and the date that somebody clicked a button. So I said, okay, we got to change this field type. So I got rid of my fields, and I created all new fields. Well, I did this with a workflow that was active, and the active workflow was referencing all the fields I just deleted. No. Broken workflow. Don't do that. Make sure you clean up your fields first, anywhere that they are used. Because on the screens, I think JIRA handles it. It removes it for you. But if they're embedded in workflow rules and behaviors and post functions, it's not going to clean it up for you. It's just going to corrupt your workflow. My users loved that day, too. I was very popular that day. Okay, what's next? Yes, sir.
External, that's all external users.
There is one somewhere. Where is it? 9, thank you. Okay, so this screenshot, no, it doesn't. Okay, so this is just a sample visual example of one way that you could group users. So the point is here that now or in the future, you might need to let external users into your JIRA instance. Maybe it's just a temporary contractor, or maybe it's an Atlassian technician or a consultant that you've hired for an audit or a compliance activity. So regardless of the scenario, you should plan for this before it happens. So I have an example from a company that didn't plan for this scenario at all. So instead, any user that had access to one JIRA project had access to all of them. How nice of us to let our proprietary data be seen by interns and temporary contractors. And even worse, any new JIRA user was made a Confluence user. So they got to log into Confluence and see all the proprietary goodies in there too. So instead, what we do now is we make sure that any external users that we add have a clear end date. As a matter of fact, we file a JIRA issue within JIRA. We use JIRA to support JIRA to remind us to remove that person's access at a certain date. And when you set users up in groups, you have the ability to bulk remove people in one easy action instead of trying to figure out where are my contractors, contracts ending at the end of the month, where are all these people? We can just sever the permissions for a group. Okay, can we talk after? Great. Oh, I would take, that's a good question. So if you hire a contractor or an intern or somebody to stay in, I would just move them out of the contractors group into the regular internal users group. Yeah, that's a good question. I like that one. Okay, what now? Yes, sir. Ooh, well, and then there's also a third type, right? There's the partner hosted. What do you guys officially call partner hosted? Help me. Well, there is a third kind. All right, but yeah, vendor managed maybe. Okay, so benefits of hosted versus on-prem. So for me, on-prem allows the most flexibility, right? You own the code. It sits on your server. You do what you want with it. Blessing and curse, right? So on one hand, you're charged with maintaining all the security, all the firewall rules, all the networking, the uptime, the upgrades, the maintenance, everything. But you get a lot of good things in return. So you get direct access to the database, and that's something I can't live without. I really recommend that you get your admin team read-only access to the database. Now, if certain issues are restricted, this will override that. So this is potentially a security issue for your organization. But man, my feeling is if you can't trust your admin team to see your data, you've got another problem, right? But having read-only database access will give you an idea of how the data is structured, and that is super valuable. It's not something you can really read about, and it'll let you see things that are just not available in the admin UI and query for things that you can't do in JQL. Also, what else? What else is good about on-prem? I don't know. So what's great about cloud is you don't have to do any of that maintenance, right? They do it for you. You've got the newest version the day it's out. You have a problem, they fix it for you. It's out of your hands. I think some companies and some industries are still a little leery, whether it's warranted or not, about their data being in the cloud. So like my company's too paranoid, right? Everything has to go through compliance and security, and they would never let the data. It's okay. What else? What did I forget? What's really good about cloud? Also, you can do some stuff with code. So like in cloud, you're limited to like wiki markup, but in server, you can use HTML and JavaScript in your fields. Now, you might not always want to because you're liable to break something, but you have the ability to do it, whereas in cloud, you're restricted. There's certain add-ons that work in cloud and not in server and vice versa, but I think the paradigm is shifting. I think more developers are starting to develop for cloud, so I think that will catch up. What else did I miss? I know there's some other things I missed. Somebody in here knows. Response time, yep. Oh, sure, yeah. Well, I can't answer that. It depends on your configuration entirely. But I can tell you one thing, the biggest memory hog is custom fields. So think about that. And think about all those extra schemes sitting around that you're not really using or that you don't really need, and get rid of that extra stuff. If nothing else, it's database space that you're taking up. Okay, my phone is telling me that it's almost Ian's time. So any last questions before we move on? Cleanup, great. Okay, that's a good one to end on. Number 17, cleanup. Oh, I don't have a real screenshot here, so how do you take a screenshot of cleanup? I have no idea. Okay, so a couple mistakes from companies. One mistake, just quite frankly, no cleanup ever took place. There was no customization or maintenance strategy whatsoever. People would install whatever they want, and maybe they'd use it or maybe they wouldn't, but it never got uninstalled. Removed. And few of us are lucky to start out with like a beautiful, brand new, fresh, clean instance. And I know even if I had started with that, I still would have made some mistakes along the way. But the good news is if you are already in the swamp, you can clean it up. You can dig your company out little by little. I've been doing it for 2 years in this one company, and every day performance improves. Every day there's less extra extraneous database records, extra plugins that they're not really using. So here's how I go about cleaning up a JIRA swamp. So the first step is to really survey the schemes and the settings and just get rid of old and unused or duplicate items. And an easy way to do that is just to look, and you can use like little browser tricks like Control F for find. A lot of times there's a pattern. There's only one page where you can't do this, and I think it might be custom fields. But there's always a pattern to how the schemes are listed, and you can use Control F to search for that pattern and see which have an association and which don't. So anything that's not associated, get rid of it, delete it. Same with inactive workflows. There's no performance impact of letting an inactive workflow hang out there at the bottom of your page, but there's no help for it either, right? Just get it out of there. Clean up your database while you're at it. And then next, examine all the projects to determine which are still active and which can be retired or archived or made read-only. The easiest way to do this is with the database query. But if you have cloud and you don't have direct access to the database, you can look at the summary page of all your projects and look at the last activity. So the last time I did this, and I do this kind of quarterly, I look at all of our projects and I see which haven't been used in X days. I was able to remove 30% of our projects. And I make them read-only. There's like 5 things I do. I change the title. I prepend X archived to the name of the title. That way the project shows up at the bottom of the list of projects in the entire admin area. I put it in a category called X archived for the same reason. I put a really scary lock icon that's like red and really ugly just to show people something's not right here, right? So the project icon gets changed. I put a message on the summary page, big red note that says, notice this project has been archived. Issues will remain viewable for legal and historical purposes, but no new issues can be created. Issues can't be transitioned. File them in this project instead. And then I get rid of the permission scheme, and I switch it to a scheme that only lets users browse. So no new creation, no transitions. Sometimes I leave a little backdoor for JIRA admins to do edits, because I found that if you're doing bulk moves of old issues, you just lock yourself out and you're not able to manage the issues well. And then that will also allow you to remove schemes and consolidate when those projects are archived. So for example, you don't need a notification scheme hanging around for a project that has no activity, right? Get rid of it. So I further reduced the database record count by 30% by just archiving stuff that we weren't using anyway. So when you want 30% less junk in your database, absolutely, right? Okay. So that's my time, but I would like to invite you to download anything that we did not get to. You can get it at jirastrategy.com/mistakes. And if you want to get me feedback about this presentation, I'll enter you to win a digital copy of the JIRA Strategy Admin Workbook.